As of today, as of this recording, I have recorded 3,520 podcast episodes, and quite literally, there is no way I ever would have gotten this far if I didn't have this one simple perspective. Podcast Growth Nation, today, for episode number 176, I'm going to share a simple perspective that has helped me get to as many episodes as I have had the privilege, pleasure, opportunity of recording. And it's something that took me a long time to really understand, because I think in the beginning we are in our heads about how everything has to be perfect and every episode has to be the best episode we've ever done. And if you don't have the perfect idea, the perfect guest, or whatever it is, you can't do the episode. And this episode is actually very appropriate because I am under the weather. I feel like garbage. I am back from a work trip. I drove 7 hours home from New Jersey yesterday. I didn't get back until 7. I ate dinner. I went to bed. I got up at 5, and I am very, very tired, and I don't feel good. So let me just get right into it. I don't want to waste your time. Your time is important. You're a podcaster. You get to the value. I'm going to get to the value. The simple perspective is something that was shared with us by one of our early guests. Her name's Lori Harder, and she said, consistent 70% days are better than spotty 100% days. So again, if we do the math, if you have 70% days in a row, that's 490%. If you have 100% days and then 0% days, that's 400%. Consistent 70% days are better than spotty 100s. My theory and my thought and my practice now is consistent 70% episodes are better than spotty 100% episodes. And there's reasons for this. And maybe the main reason is your 70% gets better. So honestly, at this point, my 70% episodes are probably better than my 100% episodes used to be. But they would never be if I didn't do them consistently long enough. There's something to that. So what I find, and this is why we get in our heads about certain guests or certain episodes or certain numbers or whatever it is we think every episode is the Super Bowl. Every episode is the championship game. Every episode is the graduation. Every episode is the final test. When in reality, it is the next one. It's a practice. And eventually you get to like a big game when you have a big guest, but all of the practice has gotten you to that point, and that's what you have to rely on. And I think so many of us, we get to a point where we're in our heads and everything has to be perfect. And, oh, you know what? I couldn't find a guest this week, so I'm going to have to skip an episode. No, do a solo and talk about something that is in alignment with your podcast. Oh, I couldn't find a great guest, so I'm not going to have anybody. Okay, do something out of the box and have a friend on the podcast to talk about something that is in alignment with what you talk about. I think we complicate it. And it makes sense because what we're doing is very public. So this is going to go out to the world and it's going to be public. And some people will say, well, that wasn't very valuable. Whatever it is, right? But it's as much for your growth as it is the people watching or listening. And that's something that I think we forget. There's no way I would have gotten to 3,500 episodes if I only did it when I felt 10 out of 10. If I only did it when I felt like I had a life-changing concept to share. If I only did it when we had a really big guest. If I only did it when we had 3 hours to record. That's not realistic for me, at least. I'm not saying your circumstances are the same as mine. But that's something I've had to really get used to. And I've had to really understand that as things get busier, 70% sometimes is what gets delivered. Now, I'm not saying that's the standard. I'm not saying I always want to be that way. I want to give 100%. I want to produce high quality content always, right? That's always the goal. But it's not always the reality, unfortunately. And I'm not saying make that an excuse to say, well, you know what? I'm not going to prep. I'm just going to show up and record. I'm not saying that's what we should do all the time. But this is a mindset for somebody out there who's a perfectionist. This is a mindset for somebody out there who is not being consistent because they're waiting for things to be perfect and align perfectly. That's not going to happen. This isn't for the person out there that says, well, good enough is enough always. We got to keep the standard up, right? We got to keep the standard up. And that's something that we're always working on. But right now, we're in a season where there's so much going on. I still have done 176 of these episodes in a row. I've still recorded Next Level University for 1,500 and something days in a row without missing. We're consistent. We're not missing. And my 70% is way better than my 100% used to be. So that is a big piece of it. And I do desire to get back to a place where we're ahead in recordings. And my goal is to be in a place where I'm ahead on recordings here and I'm not recording the day before. And I'll get there. And then the production quality will increase because the team will have more time to actually do stuff rather than me getting the episode to them 12 hours before it goes live, right? So there's a lot of things that seem like negatives when it comes to that perspective. But if you do it for long enough, it's the same adage of, oh, you have 15 minutes to work out. A lot of people say, well, nah, I'm not going to bother. Go do 5 minutes of push-ups, 5 minutes of sit-ups, and 5 minutes of squats. You're going to be in a way better position than somebody who doesn't do that. And then that 15 minutes helps the next 15 minutes get better. And then eventually when you have a half hour, you're way better. And then kind of rinse and repeat that forever. If I'm being honest, out of the 3,500 episodes I've recorded, I don't know, maybe 10% of them have been under ideal circumstances. If that, I don't even know. Some of our episodes, we went into a studio with a guest. We were brought to their studio. We walk in, we say hello to the people at the front desk. They bring us into the room. They say, okay, you have 37 minutes, go. Non-ideal circumstances. There's very little meet and greet. There's very little warm. It is lights, cameras, action, and you're on in front of a lot of people. Not ideal. Maybe other times where I was running late or Alan was running late or the guest was running late. Not ideal, right? Not ideal. How many times have I not felt well over the last 8 years of doing this? Many times. How many times was I anxious? How many times did I forget what I wanted to say? All of those things. How many times did I mispronounce a guest's name? Or for some reason, I can't say New York Times best-selling author. I just can't say that when somebody's sitting in front of me. Every one of those was a rep. So this is the simple perspective. I think this is probably the best way to put it. Every single one of these is practice. And eventually you'll get to a bigger game. Maybe your first speech is your first big game. Awesome. And then everything from there is kind of practice again until you get to the next one. Most of these episodes are not going to be the big game. They're going to be practice. This is where we have to try stuff. This is where we have to test stuff. This is where we have to get outside of our comfort zone. This is where we have to develop new skills. This is where we have to test our personalities. This is the playing ground. So when you do get that big game opportunity, when you do walk up and you have to take the test, you're capable of doing it. But if you treat every single game like it's the big game, you might stop showing up. You might only do what you're good at and not become more well-rounded. You might only get guests that are easy to interview, whatever, right? Or you might only do guest interviews because solo episodes are scary, or vice versa. There's no way I would be at this position with this many episodes if I only did it when the circumstances were perfect. So there's something about that. And then everything is kind of that way. My first speech, I treated it like it was the Super Bowl. And I crushed it. I did a really good job. I did. My second speech, I treated it like it was a practice that I couldn't possibly lose. And I lost. And I did a very bad job. I did not do a good job. I did a terrible job. I literally had the kids doing push-ups at one point because I ran out of shit to say. Not good. I overdid it in the first speech. I underdid it in the second speech. The truth is somewhere in the middle, right? So now I prepare and I try to treat it as the opportunity, the appropriate level of opportunity. I spoke at a mastermind one time, a couple of years ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, and this was as a guest of a mentor of mine in front of very successful people. And I was spoken up a lot and I was talked up a lot and there was a lot expected of me. I treated that like it was a pretty big game because it was. But I still tried to do the same things. I still didn't get to a point where I felt like my presentation was perfect. I got to a point where I said, all right, I feel like I've prepared enough for this opportunity. And the only way to understand whether or not you're accurate on that is by preparing for opportunities along the way. over preparing is great as long as you're actually going to be consistent doing it. But I find that not a lot of people can maintain that. If you're not a full-time podcaster and you're doing this as a side hustle, trying to make it, if you have a full-time job, it's really hard to put 5 hours of prep time into a guest interview. I mean, it is really hard to do that. Could you do it? Yeah, I believe in you. You could do it as a half hour a day for however many weeks. I guess it would be 10 days if you're going to do 5 hours. So for a week and a half, you prep for a half hour a day. Okay, cool. You could do that. But that you might get burnt out doing that. It just might not be sustainable. It might not be sustainable.
Hi, my name's John Larito, and I just wanted to give a big shout out to Kevin Palmieri. I had reached out to him. He had been referred to me when I had shared with a friend of mine some interest in doing a podcast, and he said, "You've got to use Kevin. He's fantastic. He's the best around. He'll get you started and off the ground and soaring high in no time." And take it from somebody who knows nothing about podcasting other than maybe saying a few things. But as far as behind the scenes, the startup, everything, I knew nothing. Kevin was phenomenal in terms of leading me through the whole process, and not just easy to work with, but really, really knows his stuff. A great combination between leading me through all the stuff I had no idea what I was doing, but also really listening to me and understanding what it was I was trying to accomplish and what my vision is. So whether you're looking for somebody to help you and get you started, or somebody, as I've done, where I'm putting it entirely in his hands because I've got total trust and confidence in him, and he is a true pro and easy to work with, any of those ends of the spectrum, you're going to have a lot of success and a lot of fun working with Kevin. Trust me. Thanks.
I traveled last week, as I said, or earlier this week, and I didn't bring my camera with me. And I used the webcam on my Mac. And was it studio level quality? No, I didn't have this mic. I had my other travel mic, which is an okay mic, but not necessarily as good as this one. Was it a 10 out of 10? No, it was probably a 7 out of 10. And I flexed a new muscle, and I learned how to, not that I haven't done it before, but I learned how to do a podcast episode outside of the studio, where I had to prop my laptop up on something and I had to hold the mic. 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. So that quote that Lori Harder shared with us for episode 34 of our podcast in 2018, probably, consistent 70% days are better than spotty 100s. That holds true, and that really is one of the fundamentals, one of the philosophies that has helped me. We sometimes only have 15 minutes to do an episode. I would like to do everything from 20 to 40 minutes. It doesn't always happen that way, right? I would love for every time I show up here to come here and say, okay, this is going to be the episode that brings everybody success. I would love that, but that's not always the case. The reason I'm doing this episode is because I'm sick, and I was thinking, interesting, a lot of people might not do it because maybe their voice is off, or maybe they're going to cough during it, or whatever it is. If I didn't do the episodes where I didn't feel like doing the episodes, there's no way I'd be here. No way. And I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't be able to show up when I don't feel great and work 2 16-hour days in a row, and then today's an easy day because I only have 3 calls. It wouldn't work that way. So there's something about the fact that when you practice and when you treat it like practice, you get better at practicing, and when the big game comes, you operate more from a higher peak performance perspective, and then big games seem less big as you go in this weird way because you're more capable. That's the difference, at least in my perspective of this show, is I really want to focus on the skills. Yes, we're going to talk about the algorithms, and yes, we're going to talk about all the stuff forever, right? Because that's what I'm practicing. But if I am an example of anything, very humbly, I don't mean this from a flex, I've just worked really hard to develop a lot of different skill sets. And whether those skill sets show through on episodes or not, that's a different story. I'm not saying I'm the best at anything. But I now am pretty good at operating under pressure because I've had the misfortune of being thrown into pressure many times and people saying, all right, go. It's like, okay, cool. I feel okay about that now, right? So that episode that I spoke about where we walked into somebody's studio, hey, nice to meet you at the front desk. Here's what we're here to do. All right, cool. Go back. They're ready for you. Timer set for 37 minutes and go. That practice, and that's the perspective, that was practice, even though it felt like the big game. That practice, now when I go on a podcast and somebody says, all right, I want you to give me something really good that I can put at the front of the episode, I don't feel like I'm put on the spot. It's like, all right, cool. What do you think we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk about consistency. All right, cool. Here you go. Boom. Let me give you one. That is because I've practiced that so many times. So that is the perspective. Every single one of these episodes is practice. Yeah, you're going to have some big games. And I guess effectively every time you get a new opportunity, that is a bigger game. But don't forget that it is just an elevated practice. So maybe it's a scrimmage. I'll say that. Maybe it's a scrimmage. And then there are preseason games. And then there are regular season games. And then there are playoff games. And then there are the big games. Just make sure you have the spectrum of that correct. And it changes over time, and I guess it's hard to explain, but that's my perspective today. That's what's really jumping off the page for me. Because I could very easily say, well, I don't feel good, I'm just going to skip an episode, or I don't want people to hear my hoarse voice, or whatever it is. That's not how I got here. Right? That's not how I got here. I got here by showing up and giving what I got, even when I have only 70% to give. Even when I have only 30% to give. I have recorded some terrible podcast episodes, for sure. For sure. One, most people aren't going to listen to them. Two, those helped me develop the skills necessary to be here today. And three, if we think of this from anything else, okay, if you want to be a poet, there's a lot of things that you start. There's a lot of poems that you start that you take the page and you rip it up and throw it in the trash. It's hard to do that with podcast episodes because it's public. That's the difference. There are musicians out there that have atrocious songs you've never heard. They're out there. They released them. Nobody knows. Nobody knows about the songs because they kept going and they made better music and they made better music. There are authors out there that have written terrible books that you would never read because they're terrible. But it doesn't matter because they went on to make things that were really good. I'm saying you can do the same thing. But it is a practice. And it is mastery. And it is a commitment. It is a commitment. There are a lot of places I'd rather be right now. Being in bed is one of them. But today's the day to record. We have an episode that we're going to record after this. And it's not going to be the best episode I've ever recorded. It's not going to be. But it will be an episode. And it will take me to 3,521. And I'll continue doing it that way. So that is my hope for all of you, is you will get this perspective a lot sooner than I did. I mean, I lost sleep, and I still lose sleep, just less, over interviews. Like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we're interviewing this person. What am I going to do? What if I mess up their name? Whatever it is. As somebody who's been interviewed on a lot of shows, I care way more about your personality. I care way more about the research you've done. I care way more about your mission and your message and your character than whether or not you mispronounce my name. My name gets mispronounced all the time. I don't care. I could care less. There's more important things in the world than you mispronouncing my name. Now, as a podcast coach, you got to get your shit together and do your best. I'm okay if somebody knows how to pronounce it, but then gets nervous and mispronounces it. That's different than just having no idea, right? So that is the fine line here. I'm not saying show up and just guess and see what happens. There's a lot of research. You can listen to an episode of a guest and figure out how to pronounce their name. And then if you mess it up because you're nervous, that's a different conversation. I've had people that have messed up the intro and they say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Let me go again. So you're totally good. Like, I haven't been there 100 times before. You're totally good. I actually appreciate the fact that this is what I'll say before I get out of here. I would much rather somebody have the courage to try to do a live intro read and mess it up than for them to say, oh, I do all of my intro and my outro recordings after. I do it on my own and get it perfectly. What's going to happen when you have to do it live one time? Will you be prepared? That is the fine line. The fine line is not looking like an idiot forever while you look less like an idiot. That is the fine line. All right, we're going to get out of here. I hope for you that this episode made sense to you. And that's more from my perspective. I hope for me that I was able to convey this message to you. I hope that you're practicing. Yeah, I hope that you're practicing. And I hope that you understand that essentially none of these are actually the big game as long as you keep going. I've messed up a lot of opportunities. I've gotten a lot of opportunities right also, but so many of the opportunities I've gotten right came from opportunities that I had messed up. And it's never really as bad as you think. When I bombed the speech and I had the kids do push-ups, it's a funny story now. At the time, it was terrible, but there was lessons in it. I didn't prep enough. I got arrogant. I thought I could just show up and it would go fine. I can't just show up and it'll go fine. It's better now. I can show up and it'll go better, but that is the game, right? And that is the process, and that is what we're all here to do. We're here to get better. I don't want you to be successful if you can't actually handle the level of opportunities you're given, because that's a recipe for disaster. I want you to practice so much that when you do get the opportunity you've been working so hard for, yeah, it's a big game, sure, but you win the game, and then the practices are better. The practices are on a better field or whatever they are, right? So that is what I hope for you. That's what I hope for all of us. All right, as always, if you are somebody who needs help with anything we talked about today, maybe you're dealing with perfectionism, maybe you don't know what direction to go in, whatever it is, I'll have my link below for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. Again, I'm not going to sell you anything. Bring all the questions you have. I've had people show up with a list of 30 questions. I will do my best to get through every single one of those. And what we don't get through, I'll give you my email and you can message me the rest. Podcast Growth Nation, a group of podcasters trying to get a little bit better every single day. We'll have the link in the show notes for that. That's our Facebook group. And as always, until next week, keep on crushing it, keep on podcasting, and I will talk to you then.